Hello, YouTube viewers. My name's Kurt Mullins.
I'm Derek Sumi.
And this is
American Music.
We are here with a very special episode this week, our first official guest, and a very special guest it is. His name is Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer.
And we're dedicating the entire episode to our really fantastic interview that we had with him. Mark Anthony is a world-renowned fourth-generation science-based evidential psychic medium, featured regularly on major television shows, such as CBS's Emmy Award-winning show, The Doctors.
He's the author of the bestsellers Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. And we hope you enjoy this in-depth interview with our friend, Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, on American Music.
Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Derek.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's good seeing
Mark.
you. It's good seeing you, Kurt.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Welcome to the palatial green screen studios here. And let's get right to it. Mark Anthony is a psychic medium who I went to see personally after my dad died. And it wasn't something that I generally did in life. I never went to have my cards read or anything like that. I wasn't into checking my horoscope on the daily. And seeking out a psychic or a medium was never something I intended to do. My dad passed away suddenly, and I was compelled to do it. But I needed the specific type of person who would bring a level of composure and reality and science to it. And I ran into Mark by just doing a random search. I mean, I literally searched for about 10 minutes, and your name came up. I was like, this guy seems interesting. And then it says Melbourne, Florida. I was like, give me a break. The guy lives like minutes from me. The place we set up the meeting is 10 minutes from my house. Pretty meant to be when I came to see you is what I felt. Mark was able to connect with a lot of people on the other side from me, people that I wasn't even expecting to. For instance, my grandmother, who to remind you, said that she was kind of like a spirit guide for me. But she had passed when I was probably about 9 or 10.
Well, and Derek, that's not unusual in the work that I've done since doing the reading for you.
This is about 7 or 8 years ago now at this point.
And what I've discovered, and working with afterlife scientists who are studying the other side, spirit communication, it appears to be a collective consciousness. And what I mean by that is, see, people tend to think that spirit communication is individualized, that it's one spirit per person. But what we're seeing now is that you have a group of spirits coming forth in tandem. And the way I like to explain it, and I do that in my book, Evidence of Eternity, and my upcoming book, I'm getting deeper into the collective consciousness, is that think of your soul, your spirit, as a drop of water. And so when you die, that drop of water plunges into this vast, infinite ocean. So on a quantum physics level, in the realm of spirituality, we refer to this as our soul or as our spirit. Physicists refer to it as the quantum electromagnetic field in your brain, and in the realm of psychology, they call it consciousness.
And you find that all these fields are kind of similar.
Well, they're now beginning to overlap. What we're finding is that who and what we are survives physical death, and that's why they call them survival of consciousness studies. They're showing they're doing brain scans on people as they're in the final phases of dying, and it appears that electrical activity seems to remain for up to 2 minutes after the body flatlines. And then some people say, well, does it just dissipate? Well, then you bring in people like me, mediums, who communicate with spirits, and they seem to be pretty much alive and extremely intelligent and able to communicate. What we have found is that when people die, their consciousness separates from the body, and this occurs whether or not the person's religious. It occurs whether or not they have any background or understanding of the afterlife or near-death studies. There's a feeling of floating. Then there's the going through the tunnel into the white light, encountering people that they know who have passed. Then depending on how long the experience lasts, when they go beyond that point into the white light, which is an infinite intelligence, which you and I might call God. And this is happening regardless of cultural background, socioeconomic status, faith, whether or not people believed in God or not. And the fascinating thing is in children. Children are describing the same type of experiences as adults. And so when they come back, they begin to describe things in detail. And many times when a spirit separates, they'll see or experience things that there was no way they could possibly have known. One of my favorite stories is there was a woman who died on an operating table. And she said she was floating above the table, and she went past the light fixture and said, well, this is really dusty. I need to tell the the nurse. And then she goes, oh my gosh. And next thing she
I'm
knew,
above a light right now.
she's hovering above the hospital, and she sees
nitpicking on her way
Well, she
to the
sees
other
the
side.
rain gutters, and there was this red tennis shoe wedged in the rain gutter on top of the hospital. So when she came back and she started talking about this, the surgeon said, get 2 people up on the roof right now. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
And exactly where she said it was, they found a red sneaker stuck there. Now, the critics are saying, and the skeptics say, well, this is the byproduct of a dying brain, is where you feel like you're going through a tunnel. But how would a dying brain know that there's a red tennis shoe and a rain gutter on top of the hospital?
You also hear a lot about children as well who experience these kind of things.
Correct.
Now, the idea behind that is it because they're closer to the veil, so to speak, like children are earlier in life, so they're closer to that
Yes.
that vast ocean, and the older people are closer to it on the other side, that
Correct.
they experience it more?
And children don't block. A child will accept something, whereas once we hit about age 5, we start going to school or kindergarten or whatever.
Is that what, like the onset of the ego and the
Yes, that's where we start. No,
Desires,
that can't
my
be
needs, my
put away.
wants, yeah.
Exactly. And
earthbound things?
Earthbound things, and that's why children are very open to seeing the presence of spirits. And we'll talk about, they'll start describing somebody and to their parents, and their parents say, well, gosh, that was my father, the child's grandfather that he or she never met.
Wow.
Okay, and that's not an unusual thing. And you're right, Kurt, at around 5 is when we start teaching children, don't do that. Stop thinking that.
Don't talk to your imaginary friends.
Don't talk to your
That's
imaginary
wrong.
friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wrong. And when I was about 3.5, 4 is when I started seeing my invisible friends. Now, the advantage, I suppose, that I had is because both my parents had these abilities as well. They saw them,
Wow.
and they knew what was going on with me. And what my father said is, don't talk about it to anyone
Really?
outside of the house.
Wow.
They won't understand.
So they had those abilities, but it was something that they kept personal. They didn't have a career out of it. They didn't promote it in the world.
No, my dad, he was...
I mean, it was another time as well. But
Of course. Well, my dad, he was a NASA engineer and started off his career as a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Okay, my mom was a commercial illustrator, artist. So, no, they were not practicing mediums in the commercial sense. But I grew up in a household where seeing spirits was not an unusual thing. It was like the reason my father, when I started seeing spirits, he got very, very upset.
Really?
And I was afraid, and what it was, my mother's family was Italian, and they were all on board with, oh, he's the saint of the saints, But on my dad's side, very, very conservative English descent. And his sister, she was a very, very gifted psychic medium. He had 4 sisters, but one of them, Marjorie, she could see spirits. And she unfortunately married this guy who was a fundamentalist, a Christian. And I don't mean to disparage fundamentalist Christians, but I will disparage him.
but you wrote a song about it. Want to hear it? Here
Well,
you go.
he didn't appreciate her gift. And one morning, he was getting ready to go to work, and he worked at a steel plant in Pennsylvania. I think it was Harrison Steel. And she begged him not to go to work. She goes, I'm getting that feeling in my stomach. I'm feeling terrible about this. You can't go. And she started throwing a fit. He goes, fine, I'll stay home. Well, a crane lifting thousands of pounds of steel beams, the cable snapped and flattened the machine shop that he worked on and killing everybody in it.
In the
so
shop.
if he had been there, 99.9% chance he would have been killed. So you would think that he would have been grateful.
Evidence enough.
Right. Instead, he felt that she was doing the work of Satan, had her involuntarily committed to a mental institution, and subjected against her will to electroshock therapy over a period of 6 months, to where it basically damaged her brain enough to where she never once again, for the remainder of her life, talked about seeing spirits. And so when I was 3.5 and I started talking about this, my father said, I remember he shook me and he goes, "People who see things, others don't get taken away." And I was so scared, and then I could see, and he held me and he says, "Mark, I'm sorry." He goes, just please. And then when I turned 5, I started school, and I went to Catholic school. And you think they'd be predisposed to this, because think about it, we got angels and saints and all these supernatural beings.
And life after death. And
life after
and,
death. And
Exorcisms.
exorcisms. Yeah, we got the whole kabang. And my parents were like, do not talk about this with them, because I could see that they were not very open to this. However, I've also had friends, and because I was supposed to go into the clergy, and I decided not to, because I just filled with too many rules and regulations, and I ended up going to law school instead, so figure that one out. But
we're gonna get down to the nitty-gritty.
But what happened is, a lot of my friends that are priests, they're in the La Salette order. And the La Salettes, like most people have heard of the Franciscans, the Jesuits, the Dominicans, the La Salettes are a very small, extremely intellectual order. And they're kind of the mavericks in the Catholic Church. And I remember my good friend, Father Sonny, and he has since passed, he said, "Mark, what do you think the saints were?" And we had this lengthy discussion. I've done a lot of research on it, and that's in a couple of my lectures, where psychics and saints exhibit the same abilities.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so if you joined the clergy in medieval France, let's say, you were receiving a vision of the Holy Spirit, like St. Francis of Assisi and St. Anthony of Padua, St. Clare of Assisi. She was a remote viewer. St. Clare of Assisi, and since we're doing this for television, is the patron saint of television. Although she died 800 years before television was ever invented. Because she could see things in real time across the village and across Italy.
It was being transmitted to her.
So Pope Pius XII in 1958 declares her the patron saint of television. So tell me that the Vatican doesn't know about these
Or
things.
appreciate those things.
These things.
Yeah.
Then if you're in medieval France and you're somebody like Joan of Arc, who hears spirits, who help, inspire the French army under her guidance to defeat the English and drive them out, and then the English capture her, they promptly burn her at the stake as a witch. So if you look at us throughout history, how we are framed, how we are utilized, and how the smart psychics in earlier years joined the clergy, like the children at Fatima, Bernadette of Lourdes, they were all receiving these visions. And that
they could be
was
safe
sanctioned.
to practice, but they're gifts.
Exactly.
And they would be utilized.
Right. So
Rather than burned at the stake.
rather than burned at the stake. And then as I got older, my parents explained to me why they were so concerned.
How older?
Probably when I was about 13 or 14.
Puberty.
Yeah,
Adult onset,
and
yeah.
my mom, and then Mom and I would always talk about it, because she, was really, really excited about the fact that I was able to.
So what about
do this.
that 10-year period between Dad telling you don't talk about it and then them ushering in you to that? Did they stop? They didn't go away, did they?
No, but I started not paying attention. They sort of.
How do you do that?
Well, I was so busy with schoolwork
Okay.
and all that.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of our little secret in
Yeah.
the family. And, Dad was like, don't think about it, put it off to the side.
So that was a strategy that he was kind of giving you.
It was. And when I encounter young and inexperienced mediums or psychically open people, and they go, spirits are around me all the time and it frightens me, what they don't realize is, well, you can stop it. Just say, don't do this now. And what people have to realize in spirit communication, you're in control, not the spirits. And once you start putting that out there, then they will begin to take a step back. Okay.
But as a child, I'm sure that's something hard to. I mean, you don't talk to adults that way, let alone spirits from the other side.
No, you don't. And I remember
you have to learn to assert yourself probably at an earlier age.
You do, and I remember being chastised and made fun of because I was talking to people that nobody else seemed to be aware of.
Yeah. But is this passed down? Is there something that can be passed down in a hereditary sense?
It appears to be a recessive genetic trait. It runs in both sides of my family, and I've tracked it back to the 1890s on both sides. My father, he had his sister Marjorie, his mother Isbell and his maternal grandmother Grace all exhibited these abilities. My mother and her grandmother, my maternal great-grandmother Giovanna. And what's cool about Giovanna is PBS did a special on the Italian Americans. It was a 2-part special, and they did an entire segment on my great-grandmother Giovanna and even referenced her psychic abilities.
Oh, wow.
And so it was really fascinating. I remember watching on TV going, oh my God, you know.
Did your family call it mediumship? Did they know what they were doing? Did they know what they had the ability to do? Or was it just something like, this happens, and it's in our family, and we don't tell anybody about it? Or were you kind of the first to kind of bring out the scientific aspects of it, that put a name on it and
Exploring it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my dad's family was so hush-hush. I'm not really sure what they called it
Yeah.
other than the gift.
The thing, yeah.
My mother's family referred to it as second sight. And which makes sense because the sixth sense, part of that is being able to see things in the spiritual sense.
And physiologically, do you mean almost like a memory or a daydream? Like a second sight?
Well, the way I would describe it is for all the viewers,
Yeah.
if you want to...
And for us too, because we don't know what we're
Okay.
talking about.
Well, right now I want both of you to think of the Eiffel Tower. Do you see it? Mm-hmm. That is mostly how I see spirits.
Yeah.
They appear as a vivid image in my brain, and the way you may be seeing the Eiffel Tower may have more of a bluish tint than you may see it more with a greenish tint.
Mine's at night.
But we're seeing the same thing. Then with the sixth sense, there's clairvoyance, which is seeing, clairaudience, which is hearing, clairsentience, which is feeling, and then with clairsentience, there's clairscent, which is smelling, clairgustance, which is tasting, and clairsavance, which is knowing. But with clairvoyance, there's objective and subjective. Subjective is what you two just experienced by thinking of the Eiffel Tower. It's subjective in that it is personalized to you and what you're seeing in your mind's eye. Whereas objective clairvoyance is if a spirit appeared in front of us and all three of us are picking up and perceiving it. The reason it's objective is because more than one person can document it.
Yeah.
And that's always cool when that happens. And I've been on all these paranormal investigations and something appears and everyone starts freaking out and it's like, woohoo, you know.
Yeah.
I get all excited. Everyone else is running and screaming.
I'm the same way. I get excited. I just find it really fascinating and interesting. So I never run away. I might get startled if you're not expecting it.
Well, sure.
Obviously. But when it happens, it's just like, all right, let's get to the bottom of this. So if at any point during your, any of the experiences you've had, have you ever encountered something that you didn't know what it was?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Wow.
And it's funny, boy, we could talk all day. I just met, I was really privileged to meet a guy that was in the Psychic Warfare Division. He's in his 70s. His name is John Alexander.
Like,
and I met him.
like Black Ops or something? What are you
Yeah,
talking
oh
about?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was part of Project Stargate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which interestingly enough is something that Jimmy Carter, a born-again Christian president, authorized.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had and actually the British, I believe, were the first to have a Psychic Warfare Division back in the 1930s. Then the Nazis had one, and of course the French didn't. Sorry, but then the U.S., the Soviet Union, and then all the other powers started jumping on that. And even though the CIA publicly says they don't fund it, the DIA does. The Defense
Money goes
Intelligence
somewhere.
Agencies.
Where
yes.
does it go?
Money goes somewhere. But what he was telling me is that with UFOs, what the belief is it's not a tin can that travels thousands and millions of light years, but rather a device that transcends dimensions.
Yeah.
And that's how they're able to go from, a solar system 10,000 light years away to here. That it's actually an interdimensional shift, which is fascinating because I know that I'm communicating with another dimension, and this then fits in with string theory that there's not just one universe, but there are multiverses. So the spiritual realm could be something of a non-corporeal dimension, whereas the Romulans or the Borg, or hopefully not, whoever's coming through would be, I guess, like us in the sense that they're corporeal, but they're able to, pardon the use of the term, warp the time-space continuum in order to transcend these distances without violating Einsteinian physics.
Well, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and that's
The TARDIS.
Exactly.
Is that the premise of it?
Yeah, I wish I could remember what the acronym for the TARDIS was, because it's time and space and dimension, something like
But
that.
what one must remember is that the science fiction and fantasy of today all too often is the reality of tomorrow.
Certainly.
Let's look at, if I told the two of you, I know you're going to say yes, but if I said there's energy surrounding you loaded with incredible amounts of information, a lot of people say, well, I don't think so. Well, radio waves, okay? Turn on a radio. In the year 1850, radio and radio waves were science fiction. It was a theory. And then within 50 years, the Italian inventor Marconi was actually transmitting a radio signal from Rome to New York City and back. Wow. So within the span of 50 years, what was completely looked at as Jules Verne science fiction. I mean, Jules Verne came up with the idea of a submarine, okay?
Yeah.
Leonardo da
Boat
Vinci.
that goes under the water?
Under the water. Da Vinci drew sketches of helicopters.
Yeah, helicopters fine.
Okay, so just because we do not currently possess the technology doesn't mean it isn't possible.
Or the understanding.
Yeah. I mean, Albert Einstein and Max Planck, Werner Heisenberg, they shook up the physics world, which had been mired in Newtonian materialist reductionism for the prior 200 years. And then they started talking about quanta and electromagnetic energy and light being both particles and waves. And even though Newton's theories or his laws of physics remain intact, his theories have been modified. Challenged and modified, right? Because science and physics and our understanding is not a stagnant state. It's a dynamic system.
I remember I met Neil deGrasse Tyson one time because he did a lecture at Penn State. And, basically I had stayed out and I flagged him down and I asked him a question. And, I said, all of the science that we develop is still rooted on our observations, and we have imperfect observations because we're imperfect creatures. So how do we account for that when trying to think about these bigger theories? All these things that we don't know. Because we have these imperfect faculties. How do we really know what the truth is, basically? And he said, well, the stuff that we've observed over and over, and that we have a record for, we have an idea of what that is. But that doesn't mean it's not part of a much larger mechanism going on. All these other things. Yeah, we only see this much of it. So like with Newtonian physics for so long, that was just a small understanding of a much broader, and the quantum realm might even be just another random thing. There's probably thousands of other different, states of matter that we have never been able to detect, so we don't know how to interpret it.
Well, certainly, I mean, by the time of Einstein, it was scientists or physicists were aware that everything was made of molecules. Molecules are made of atoms. And then they start discovering that atoms are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And then the theory that they're made up of yet a smaller particle of electromagnetic energy, which is quanta.
Yeah, quanta.
Okay, but they did not have the technology prior to that era to discover this. And that's what I believe with spirit communication is everything has a logical basis and an explanation. It's just whether or not our technology is capable of, just as you both of you have said, of perceiving and detecting it and explaining it. And that's why I believe that everything that I do is on the basis of frequency and quantum physics and a frequency shift and interdimensional communication.
It's. Do you think the times we live in are we have a very divided political world we live in right now, but it's due to a very progressive approach by some people to allowing in the world. It's led to a lot of hardships right now. There's families that fight and bicker among each other, and we seem so divided and everything. But I think that the good aspects of progressivism are that the allowance for what we don't know.
I think we're living in an era where things are discussed openly now that had previously been taboo.
Certainly.
Okay.
In the mainstream sense.
In the mainstream sense, I mean, I appear on television on a regular basis as a medium, and while they do ask me questions, I'm also appear at expos, standing next to physicists and psychologists and neurologists, and we're talking about the afterlife as a provable thing.
Exactly.
People need to realize not only am I an attorney, I'm a member of the Florida Bar and the United States Supreme Court Bar, and they frown very heavily on fraud. So I do not go around making these things up. And to answer your question, I guess because I'm an attorney, I mean, and I've heard all the psychic lawyer, I hear all the ignorant people that want to make jokes, and if it makes you feel better about yourself to insult someone else, well, then I'm sorry for you.
Yeah.
Well, it's the mark of people with low self-esteem that they have to attack someone else in order to make themselves feel good about themselves, and I wish them well on their self-discovery and journey. But
Bring everybody down to their own pit.
But what makes me different from the other mediums is the fact that I can and do understand this on the basis of science and quantum physics, and that I'm able to explain it in a logical and understandable fashion. Kurt, one of the reasons that you are as open to the spiritual experiences is with your background in Buddhism. Buddhism is a very open and accepting religion, and does not look like does not look at either the Almighty or the afterlife in a fear-based sense. Neither does Hinduism. The Hindus look at psychic ability as part of one's spiritual journey, whereas in the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, this is evil.
Yeah.
And where this happens, it's really kind of interesting. In the book of Samuel, the King Saul goes to the Witch of Endor because his favorite and most trusted advisor, the prophet Samuel, has died. And the Witch of Endor brings forth the spirit of Samuel. And Samuel basically says, Saul, your time is at an end. And then after that, Saul gets defeated in battle, his sons are slain, he commits suicide, and then David becomes the king of the Jews. So the rabbinical community starts saying, well, look at what happened to him. He did not trust in our faith and our clerics and go through us, and this is what happened to him. On the other hand, wasn't it the will of God for Saul to give way to David, who was an ancestor of Jesus through his mother Mary? So there's another way of looking at that.
I always, and that's one thing that I get into conversations with people sometime about paranormal phenomenon, because they contribute it to being something supernatural. And in my opinion, that it's not supernatural. It's natural.
It's natural.
It's something that happens. If it wasn't supposed to happen, it wouldn't happen. So from a religious standpoint like that, talking about the Witch of Endor, if God is an almighty, all-powerful being, he wouldn't let it happen if he didn't want it to happen.
Exactly.
Like if it wasn't something that was, or at least it wouldn't have been something he didn't know about. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
well, and when you start hearing, "Oh, my God is a jealous God," of what?
yeah.
He's God.
What? Yeah.
He, she, they are God.
Yeah.
And so I mean, we could sit here all day and pick at that. But when people say you're profaning God, no. What happens is God is quantum electromagnetic energy, which everything on a subatomic level is made of. Mm-hmm. The light that's shining on us, the air we're breathing, us, the chairs we're sitting on, the radio waves that are transmitting this message, the nuclear reactions within the sun, everything is electromagnetic energy. That's God. Always was, always will be. Okay. And so the great spiritual teachers, like Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, were explaining this in what their understanding in the vernacular of the day. It's just that people start to put a human face on God, which makes sense. We can't really comprehend infinity, but we can make Jesus the face of God, or Buddha, or Krishna, or Shiva, or however.
Disney anthropomorphizing animals.
Pretty much.
You get it.
Right, so that you have
Something
a relatable interface to the infinite.
Which Joseph Campbell describes as the role of religion to allow you to grasp the unknown, because it is unattainable, to attain the unattainable.
Exactly. He was such a brilliant writer, philosopher,
and communicator.
He understood that. So I never down anyone for having a religion. It's when you get into we're right, you're wrong, and therefore you must be,
Yeah. If it connects you to God, it's a good thing.
Yes.
If it disconnects you from other people.
Well,
That's another
it's like
problem.
social media gives cowards a chance to be bullies, and I get people all the time saying you're doing the work of Satan, and they're judging me. It's like, miss the whole thing Jesus said about judging others.
There you go. Yeah.
So it's really not your place to judge now, is it?
And I've gotten into some, especially so. As Derek mentioned, I was a chaplain's assistant in the National Guard, and typically people who join the military are of a particular persuasion. They have a particular belief system.
God, guns,
So-
and government.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they, we get in very detailed discussions with some of these people, and we would talk about the Bible and things like that. And some of them will believe in Satan's trying to do X, Y, or Z against God's will. And I said, okay, well, before you said that you believe that God was all powerful, all knowing, everywhere, the most powerful being in the universe. So how would Satan be able to get one up on God without God knowing about it, without just being stopped right
Without
there?
he being a part of the plan.
Yeah, or
That's-
without being a part of the plan.
Yeah.
It's much more reasonable to think that these things that you try to, or that you may perceive as evil or bad, or these things that you don't understand, so you say it's the devil's work. In reality, it's just part of the same picture, but since you don't understand it, you ascribe it as something evil. Does that make because people fear what they don't understand?
It makes perfect sense, because when you look at where Christianity made a shift is when the Roman Empire became Christian. And what happened was Emperor Constantine then declared that at the Council of Nicaea that the empire was Christian, and that Jesus was the Son of God and would return, but until he does, Constantine, Emperor of the Romans, was God's vicegerent on earth. And if you disobeyed God's vicegerent on earth, you were condemned to an eternity of torment and suffering. So it was really a brilliant political move, because what he did is, this is where Christianity becomes fear-based. Then, to add icing to the cake and solidify his position, he sends his mother Helena to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage. So figure she's being escorted by a couple Roman cohorts, so a couple thousand people plus the at least 100 people that had to wait on her personally, and there'd be 2 Roman legions there stationed in Palestine, Judea, and there'd be all the onlookers, and they led her to Golgotha, so there's 20,000 people watching, and they're like, over here, your majesty, a little bit, and all of a sudden she finds the one true cross.
Oh, I found it.
Oh, and because
There
it
is.
says so right there. And now his mother is Saint Helena, and brings the sacred holy cross to the new capital of the empire, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. So what he's done is he's recreated himself in the image of Jesus, and his mother as Mary, the mother of Jesus, and then of course has most of his family executed because he was untrustful of them and acting in a very unchristlike manner.
Do you think this was a genius use of a religion as a way of control?
Absolutely.
Or do you think
It was a brilliant political maneuver,
wasn't
because
just a sociopath who...
well, probably all
What was it
the
about?
above.
Yeah.
Probably all the above, because at that point the empire was essentially Christian anyway, and he figured it needed an authoritative text, so he ordered one into existence, and that's
Made it
the
up.
first version of the Bible. And then it becomes, and if you look at early depictions of God, he looks very much like Constantine, okay, sitting on the throne with the scepter, smiting and condemning. And this is unfortunate, because Christianity goes from the teachings of Christ, which are all about peace and love and understanding, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, into you will do what the emperor of Rome says. And so as the empire begins to fall apart, every king in Europe grabs the divine right of kings. And then when the Muslims begin overwhelming the Eastern Empire, you think that didn't get absorbed into Islam, which is the concept of the caliphate. And ISIS is calling itself the latest version of the caliphate, which is a political leader ordained by Allah, which is simply the Arabic word for God. And so this is where the Abrahamic religions, particularly Christianity and Judaism, become fear-based, judgmental, and inducing guilt. And that's why I always say that you can tell the difference between a religious fanatic and a real Christian. Christians are about peace, love, forgiveness and
Serving
understanding.
others.
They really do what Jesus would do.
Certainly.
Whereas a religious fanatic likes to judge, condemn,
smart.
and use their religion as a moral pretext for anger, bigotry, hatred, and violence. And I don't mean to get political, but unfortunately that is the sad state of what has happened to a very, very beautiful belief system.
And that's why you keep religion out of politics.
Well, and that's why the founders of this country were so wise. Now, granted, they were flawed. A nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal when most of these men owned slaves. But, we'll get to that eventually.
Not the women.
But they also were looking at 1,000 years of European religious warfare and realized
How do we
that
stop this?
once you start putting religion and politics together, it results in war.
Because people are willing to die for it
Yeah.
and lose everything for
Because
it to defend
they
it.
have that solidified belief behind them that they're doing God's
God's
work.
work, yeah.
And that always bugged me too, because again, if you believe God is an almighty, all-powerful being, why do you got to do his job for him or their job for them? Why do you got to take their place when they are the ultimate power of the universe?
It's hypocritical.
Yeah.
And
So
that's it.
Mediums and psychics are vilified by a lot of religious fanatics, because I know there's passages in Leviticus and Deuteronomy about this, but there's also Romans 12 verses 6 through 8 that we all have gifts from God, and if your gift is one of prophecy, you shall prophesize. And it's a very positive and uplifting passage. Where we're considered good in the Bible, they call us prophets. Where we're bad, they call us witches. But
Selectively.
what we let people know is that religion's a good thing, but you yourself have a direct connect with God. Okay, God is here, God is around you, and you don't need a dogma, clerics, or tithing to connect yourself to God. If that community works for you, that's fine. But that's why traditionally zealous religious fanatics have been openly hostile towards psychics and mediums.
You told me when we went to our session with you, you explained that communicating with spirits from the other side was similar to tuning in a radio at the time.
Very much so.
And Kurt, it's funny because I don't know if this is a similar situation, but Kurt was telling me a story about being in a room and walking into a part of the room and all of a sudden hearing music, and walking out of just another step away and it was gone, and taking a step back. Am I telling you
yeah,
correctly?
so it was in the corner of the room. It was at a house that I lived in when I was a child, teenager growing up. And I had stepped towards the corner of the room, and all of a sudden there was this older music playing, and it sounded like a radio, and I didn't have a radio in the room. The TV
Nor did you
wasn't
listen to
on.
that music.
No, yeah, it was. I don't know if it was classical, but it was definitely older. So, and it was right in this corner. It was almost like if there was like a record player or something right in that corner.
Right there, yeah.
So
But all of a sudden,
yeah, all of a sudden, just I walked towards and I heard the music, and then I looked out the window just to see if there was any. There was nothing out there. We had a pretty good bit of land in between each of our houses, and then I just stepped back a bit, and it was gone. Then I stepped forward, and it was there again. So it was only that much of a movement, and it was as if it was right there, so you couldn't hear it at all.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Couple of different possibilities there. One is in spirit communication, and for people that go to my YouTube channel or the media room on my website, they'll see in a lot of the readings I sing songs. Like I'll be talking to a spirit, and all of a sudden I'll start singing a song, and that's because the spirit's transmitting that. And so that's entirely possible. So that would be an example of clairaudience, where you're hearing something in your mind's ear, and it's like, I heard that.
Well, it's funny when you mentioned with the smells and the taste and I don't try to ascribe to any particular belief. I just kind of am open to whatever the possibilities are. I observe whatever happens, and that's it. But
even
I don't
though
try.
he was a chaplain's assistant in the military.
I was a chaplain's assistant, but technically a Buddhist chaplain's assistant. So I'm just open to whatever could be, and I don't try to ascribe a certain belief to it because I don't want to be biased about what I'm experiencing. But I do like going on paranormal investigations, and I've experienced enough to know that some weird stuff happens that is very difficult to explain. But when you were explaining that, I've had the phantom smells. I've had hearing music or hearing voices or other sounds that we've caught on tape or audio. I've seen different things manifest in various times. I've seen things move on their own that shouldn't move. So virtually almost everything that you mentioned, except for maybe taste. I don't think we ever tasted anything that was supposed to be there, but everything else.
Now you will.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was doing a reading yesterday for this lady, and I go, "Your mom is showing me the most beautiful pineapple upside down cake I've ever tasted, and has the fresh pineapples on the top, the little cherries. And I'm getting coconut and a hint of orange." And she goes, "Holy pineapple!" She goes, "That's exactly how she made it."
Yeah, that's what she
You
said.
know, and that was her special. Yeah, that's what she said.
Holy pineapple.
You know, a food came through in our rating too. You said that you were getting these lemon squares. You said these lemon squares. You know those little lemon squares people make? They put the confectioner sugar on it. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, Mark. And you were like, well, sometimes that happens. We're just going to move on. I talked to my mom, and she said, Grandma made those all the time.
Yeah.
And here's the recipe in her handwriting.
And see, what I like is
And that was my grandmother that was expressing to you, through you to me, about being very connected to me. I was her first grandchild, and she'd always been kind of a spirit guide for me. And she was telling me that she loved how analytical I was, but I needed to stop and smell the roses, as you put it. That I needed to have more of an experience here, pay attention to what's going on in the here and now. And it's just fascinating that the lemon squares came through with that.
Well, and what I like about that particular type of example is people say, well, maybe you're just reading somebody's mind. But if you didn't know that your grandmother made those lemon squares, how is it that I'm reading something that isn't in your mind?
Not in any way.
Right, and that's why I'm tuning into the energy of a third party, which is a spirit.
I had a couple times where things physically happened, where the bedroom door opened by itself. It was almost completely closed. It was a winter morning. I was up early. I closed it to not bother my wife. I was walking towards the restroom, which is the door's catty corner to the bedroom door. And as I walked there, all of a sudden the door just flies open on its own. We didn't have any air, any ventilation. All the windows were closed.
Right.
You know, I went through the whole paranormal investigation thing, and it just flipped open. And then I was like, so I had my headphones in because I was listening to music to help wake me up. And I did my ghost hunter thing. I was like, okay, if there's anything here and you want to talk, that's fine. You know, I don't mean you any harm. I'd love to communicate with you. Nothing else happened. There was another time where I was sitting in bed reading. Lights were on. I was wide awake reading a book, and it felt like someone as big as me just did a cannonball in the bed next to me. Just boom! Like it made me come off the bed, and I ran out and I told my wife, I was like, something just jumped on the bed, and she's like, whatever. Like she. But the worst one, I won't say the worst one.
Most jarring one, probably.
Yeah, the most jarring one. So from time to time, I suffer from sleep paralysis, which I'm sure you know.
Yes.
That phenomenon. And when it would happen regularly, I would wake up. I wouldn't be able to move, but I'd just be able to move just a little bit, like a fingertip. And then I'd move a little bit more, and then all of a sudden, I'd be back, and my full body would be working
Right.
again. So I was having this transition of like nightmares, where I would wake up and I was having sleep paralysis, but I was having like a dream inside of a dream inside of a dream, and it kept happening. So I'd wake up in my bed, I'd have the sleep paralysis, I'd do the thing, I'd come back, and then I'd realize something was off, and I would say, oh, I'm in a dream. And then as soon as I realized it, I would wake back up in bed, same process, sleep
Right.
paralysis. So the last one, right before I actually woke up, where I thought I was awake, and there was a woman standing right next to my bed, and she was bent over, and she was whispering something into my ear, and I don't remember what she was saying. But I couldn't move, and I had this like fear, and this dread. And she was whispering something, and I was freaking out, and I was doing the thing with the finger, and I was like trying to wake up, and then bam, and then I was like, I actually woke up. And the last time I was really awake, I was feeling myself, I was breathing heavy. It took me about 30 or 40 seconds to like, okay, it was all dreaming, I'm all right, I'm fine. I put my hand down next to me in bed to feel for my wife, because she's kind of like my safety blanket, So
Right,
like,
yeah.
so like, and I feel shoulders, I feel hips, I feel my wife's body in the bed next to me. I'm like, okay, all right, everything's fine, all right, it's good, just dreaming. And then a few seconds go by, I hear our bathroom toilet flush, and my wife walks into the bedroom. The body that I just felt in the bed was not there. It was a flat bed. There's no form at all, but I distinctly felt a body laying next to me.
Your wife's body.
Yeah, or at
What
least
you
I thought it
thought.
was my wife's body, and it was no longer there. And
Fascinating, yeah.
it was such a distinct feeling that when she walked in and I put my hand back and it was just a flat bed, I was like, I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. I was like,
Let me ask you this. During these experiences, did you feel that you were somewhere else?
Well, I mean, that one.
Within the
definitely.
dream, within the dream?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were in a location other than your bedroom?
During the dream part? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, initially I would wake up and then I would see my bedroom, and then there would be just one small detail that was off. Or I walked out of the bedroom a couple times, and then I'd walk into a house that wasn't mine. I was like, oh, this isn't my house. I must be dreaming. And then it would come back.
It's very possible. Those used to be referred to as astral projections, and in more recent terminology, out-of-body experiences, which account for the sleep paralysis. Because what happens is your consciousness separates from your body, energetically remaining tethered because your body is still alive and functioning and healthy, and your consciousness wanders around.
That's why I can't move.
That's why you can't move. And then when you come back in, you get this type
that's exactly how it feels.
Exactly, because you're coming back
Yeah.
in. And that's what happens in remote viewers, or people who can voluntarily take their consciousness and shift it somewhere. That's what the intelligence agencies, they want remote viewers.
They want it, yeah. Go listen.
Go listen, go see. Yeah. And I've met people that do this, and they're pretty intense.
They can turn it on and do it.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And so what happens with some people is that you begin to travel during your sleep. That's why they used to call it an astral projection, because you're projecting. But I like out-of-body experience better.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I would have two different types with the sleep paralysis thing. So it would be, the first one would be I would wake up and I couldn't move my body. Another one would be I would be what I think was dreaming, and I'd be somewhere, but I could still feel my body physically in the bed.
Yeah.
So that sounds kind of close to what you're describing.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So you very well may be engaging, and there's people that go to training for out-of-body experiences where they recreate that in a meditative state so that you maintain control. And that's the problem when you're dreaming, because sometimes you don't have that control. I've also, in my work as a medium, connected with people who were comatose. And even had Alzheimer's, because the brain is an organ. The brain merely houses the consciousness. It is not the creator of consciousness. So the consciousness can get up and move around. And I mean, I could tell a lengthy story.
Even though you can't emote or seemingly even be there anymore, you're still in there.
Right. So the brain's malfunctioning, so that the body and the issues with Alzheimer's and all that. So I've communicated with people in that particular state. So what you're describing sounds very much like out-of-body experience. So instead of looking at it as a negative thing, the next time it happens, if it, because it also to me sounds like you're doing lucid dreaming, because you'll say, I am dreaming. If you can, tell yourself, all right, I need proof. Give me something here that this is an out-of-body experience.
I do experiment with lucid dreaming pretty regularly. I keep a journal, and that happens fairly often. And so I'll try to keep that in mind next time to prove that it's not just a dream.
Sure.
So that's really interesting.
It's funny that you talk about it being an out-of-body experience. It's not funny. It's fine. That's the way of interjecting.
Well, it's funny. Of note.
Excuse me, guys, but I was attempting to meditate for a while, and I would just, I feel like I wasn't experiencing anything. I wasn't even getting into the calmness out of it, but I kept at it. I would do my 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day, and about a month into it, I had one experience, very brief experience, where I felt like I was floating above myself.
Perfect.
I saw myself.
There you go.
And it shocked me so much, and I had to shoot right back into myself and went. I didn't do that. I didn't control it, but I saw it.
Well, what you have to realize, there's no death by meditation. Okay, you're not going to kill yourself.
No, but it was jarring to feel like out of my body.
Well, sure. Well, because it's not.
But then I thought, how could I do that again? You know what I mean? Because I wasn't doing anything other than just trying to calm and be here.
It happens more when you're not trying.
Precisely.
So,
It's exactly. It's the same thing with mediumship when you're communicating with a spirit. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this now. It's like, when you start putting that angst, the desire, the I want into it, never works. I call it passive assertive. You put out the assertion that I am welcoming and inviting the spirits to me, and then you got to get your ego out of the way, and that's when they'll come to you. It's like when I do readings for people, I always tell them, please do not go directly to no. If I ask you a question, I get some people, no. Yeah, because what they're doing is they generate negativity, and I was doing a reading for this one lady, and I kept seeing gold coins. And she goes, no, no, no. Are you sure? No, no, no. Then her father's spirit starts showing me Argyle socks. Okay, I'm like, what's up with? No, no, makes no sense. I got an email from her 2 days after the reading, and she said the day after our session, she was going through an old dresser drawer and found this Argyle sock with a knot in it, and it was loaded with gold coins. Okay, and she was like, oh my God, you know, so I was like, I wish everyone would find a bag of gold after one of my readings, and sometimes the spirit will bring up a future event.
Sure.
Okay, but if you shoot everything down and load it with negativity, that will cause them to back off. So what I would recommend with you, Derek, is continue to meditate. I know you're saying 15, 20 minutes. Do 5 minutes. Okay? Just do a basic breathing. What I recommend is, and because everyone wants to have these incredible mystical experiences.
Sure.
Start with just relaxing. And envision like you're breathing in and breathe in white light, white energy, positive. And then exhale through your mouth, in through your nose, out through your mouth, and then out through your mouth. Envision everything that's aggravating you and causing you tension as a black cloud until it's like white light in, cloud out, and then it goes from black to gray to misty to where you get white light in, white light out. And that can only be like 5 minutes, and then it's really good at bringing tension levels down. Then if there's a question or an issue or something that you want to know about or work on, that's when you pose it. When you get the white light in, white light out, it can only be about 5 minutes. I have never been able to do those really lengthy meditations. I fall asleep, and usually when I start meditating, all these people come in. Okay, mom, dad, a bunch of my friends, and some other entities that I recognize, which is fine, and I love them coming in. But for most people, start off easy. Don't try to start levitating your house and discovering the mysteries of the universe. Take it easy, develop a basic relaxation technique, because the foundation of all spiritual and psychic activity is meditation and prayer. Meditation is when you listen to God, to the universe. Prayer is when you talk or ask.
Wow. Well, you mentioned about meditating and mom and dad showing up. How, as a medium, do you kind of have to accept that you are living a different life that a lot of people are, in the sense of, like, let me give you this for instance. I had 2 dreams after my father passed, and he came to me, and I was coming out of the shower in our old house we used to live in the 90s, way before he died, and he's sitting on the couch, and I go, oh my God, and it's my dad, like, as he just lived, not in the 90s, but as he was just there. No, he shouldn't have been in his house. And I stopped, and I went up to him and I hugged him, and I said, Dad, I can't believe you're here. He goes, isn't life weird? And I woke up. And I had another dream. We were in a dormitory in a college, and he was there. And we didn't have an interaction, but I saw him. He was just joyful. He was, like, happy. And that was it. I haven't heard or seen anything from him in almost 10 years now. And I attribute that to not really being allowed to know too much. That it interferes with my experience this time around, if you want to put it that way. Like, knowing too much negates, and it goes back to, like, my grandmother's message that came through, of smelling the roses and being here. Don't think too analytically. Don't live in the future. Don't even try to think too much about what the possibilities are without really having the experience that I'm having here. Is that something that you can have as a medium? Do you have to accept that you kind of have a different understanding than probably most people on planet Earth?
It's an interesting question. It assumes that I spend a lot of time focusing on my place in the universe.
Yeah.
But I know that my life is different.
Yeah.
I know that it's different. I have come to that point where I've reconciled that, I'm definitely different, but it doesn't make me better. And that's
I don't mean that.
No.
Yeah.
But it's very important, because I've seen mediums, particularly mediums like in their early 20s, that go around like, I'm an X-Men. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I've got superpowers. It's like, you have insights, okay? And you have abilities which make you different. But do not ask me to change the water pump in your car. Mm-hmm. That is not a skill I possess. Mm-hmm. So that mechanic is by far superior to me in that particular particular context, in that we all have, as Romans 12, 6 through 8 says, we all have gifts from God. And so some gifts are different. And what my mission, if you will, is fivefold. It's to let people know that God exists, okay, however you wish to perceive God, that heaven, the afterlife, nirvana exists, that our soul is an immortal living spirit, that we can communicate with these souls, and that we will be reunited with our loved ones once it is our time to transition to the other side or into the light, however you want to frame it. And that was given to me very, very directly. And it was not long after my mother died, and I decided to start working with I don't know if I decided or if it was the way it was supposed to happen for me, but I remember that I actually had to pick up my mother's ashes. And it was very intense for me. I mean, they had put them in an urn, and it was in a box. And I put it in the back seat behind me, and like buckled, the box in. And I pulled over, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, it was and all of a sudden this flash went off in my head, and I saw her not with my physical eyes, but I saw her sitting next to me in a perfect silver white light. And she said, Mark, you have been given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief, but now you must help those who are suffering with theirs. And then not long after that, I was meditating, and that 5-point message came through to me like a ton of bricks.
Did you say to Mom, but what about my grief?
Well, yeah.
But is that is your role? I mean, you've accepted.
It is, but it also, when I lose loved ones, it hurts. It hurts probably every bit as bad as it hurts anyone else, because yes, in the spiritual sense, I know that we go on, but you miss the physical presence. And it's very important for people to realize that you have to grieve. You cannot avoid or deny or outmaneuver grief. It is something you really need to hit head on. It's part of the human condition. And I know so many people, I take Prozac, I take this, I take that. Well, you can't medicate away reality. Right?
It comes somewhere else.
It goes somewhere else. And in some instances, perhaps they need that because if they're suffering so bad, but in the short term. But you can't make a life out of medicating away the human condition, which includes grief. I know somebody that doesn't watch the news, doesn't watch anything about the news because I don't want that negativity in my life. Well, does that mean negative things are going to stop happening?
The news is still happening.
The news is still happening.
That's how you determine it.
We had dinner one time. You and my wife and I had dinner.
I remember, yes.
And my wife had just suffered a miscarriage. And Mark paused for a moment, and he said, I can't tell you why, but you'll have a reason to celebrate in about a year's time. And my son was born in a year. Yeah, right after that. So in that instance, did you have an insight of what was going to happen, or did you have an insight of something that was going to happen? Or in situations like that?
It's very...
And were you withholding information from me because of my need to go through the life moment that I have to have in life?
I don't know how to answer that. But on readings that I've done since that time, it's fascinating when the spirit of a baby will come to me and say, I will be coming into this world. And I tell the person that, and then I'll get a call from them a couple of weeks later and they go, I'm pregnant. Which is, I love when things like that happen.
Have you ever experienced something or witnessed something that a medium has done or a psychic that you didn't think was possible, or that just kind of blew your mind? It's almost like if you're a professional and you watch another professional who's really good at their job, you're like, wow, I didn't,
I thought I knew how to play guitar. But oh my God.
Actually, I went to see John Edward, and what's really nice is that out of 500 people, he picked me. and he said, I'm getting the spirit of a woman coming through, which I believe to be your mother, and she wants you to know that she's with Sonny. Well, what shook me at the time was that our priest was Father Sonny, and he had died. So I thanked him, for that. And I thought, well, that is really great. My mom's with Sonny. So I called my sister, and I hear her go, dear God. When I tell her this, I go, what? She goes, Mark, she said, I was crying this morning and missing Mom so badly, and I have her picture next to a picture of Father Sonny. And I said, Sonny, I need a sign. If anyone I know is in heaven, it's you. I need some type of sign. And then that night, John Edward picks me out of a crowd of 500 people and tells me exactly that. And what's really nice is I do that for people.
Yeah.
And I hear things like this all the time
Nice to be on the receiving
that
end
I do.
sometime.
And it was nice to be on the receiving end.
Mark, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, this has been
Thank you for
very-
coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
if you would, tell the people where they can find more information on you and anything you got coming up.
Sure, I've got an event coming up in Fort Lauderdale at the United Metaphysical Church on November 10th. It's a special Veterans Day evening of spirit communication. And you can find out more about that at my website, evidenceofeternity.com. And then December 7th and 8th and 9th, I'll be in Houston. I'll be a guest on the Great Day Houston CBS KHOU morning show with the...
Again, right?
Yeah, it is the hottest show in Houston with the coolest host,
Ooh, there it is.
Deborah Duncan. And then I'll be doing 2 nights of spirit communication at Body, Mind, and Soul. Fantastic venue in Houston. So to find out about that and my 2019 tour, please visit evidenceofeternity.com. Same as my book, Evidence of Eternity.
Counselor, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool interview.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a really good interview.
It was fun to dedicate that much time to just interviewing someone too.
Yeah.
It's something we talked about wanting to do on the show for a little while now, and to finally sit down and do it and make it happen was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
And really thankful that Mark was able to dedicate about an hour and a half to doing it.
Almost
It
2
was time.
hours, yeah.
Guy whose time is precious, and we thank you. Thank
Very
you, Mark.
busy. Thanks,
for sitting
Mark.
down with us. What'd you take away? What things stood out to you? And we got to talking about some of the experiences you were having, and Mark was talking about. You said something. Was it astral projection or an out of body experience for you, and clairaudient kind of hearing sounds in your mind's ear, as he said. But what did you take away from some of the things that were they familiar things that you?
Well, yeah, and that's something that I thought was pretty interesting, because even just him talking about his own experiences, it sounded very familiar, like it's similar to the stuff I had experienced, and he's a really well-versed guy. Like, he's very educated. Like, I study philosophy and religious ideology and stuff like that, and he was talking about the history of all these different religions and things like that, and he was on point.
He name dropped the Witch of Endor. I've never even heard of the Witch of Endor.
You've never really? Yeah, there was a couple times where I saw him like.
There's only one Endor I know, and it's the Moon of Endor. George Lucas, deep shit.
I'm pretty sure you have
Deep
hits.
cut.
You fucking hit Star Wars
Every
in
one.
every single episode.
Yub nub. Yub nub.
But yeah, there was a couple times where I saw him mention something. I'm like, oh yeah, but I see your face, and you're like, I can tell on your face, you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah. But that's some of those deep biblical cuts and deep religious cuts that his approach is the thing that turned me most on about him. I love that he's not only he's a lawyer, he's a psychic medium, but he's also a lecturer, and he's just incredibly educated and well spoken and understanding many facets of the human condition. Some people are only talented in one thing, but he's a bit of a Renaissance man when it comes to spiritual things, to political things, to astrophysical science, many facets of his entire doctrine and approach and makeup are what makes him interesting to talk to.
Yeah, and that definitely came out in various points in the interview, because he was able to make certain connections, with different areas of thought, like you said, like religious and politics and things like that. And he had a really good way of rounding out, those ideas and connecting them with each other, which I liked. I like his style in that regard. But super nice guy, really, really great, very insightful. Hopefully we'll be on again sometime.
Sure, absolutely. He's another one of the interesting characters that makes up the American music.
American music. And maybe it won't be psychic stuff next time. Maybe we'll just have an episode where we talk about movies or something.
It won't be, because we've pretty much nailed everything with Mark. I mean, we're going to get that's going to top that.
I mean, we owned it. We owned that interview.
Yeah.
So, Mark, thank you very much. And viewers out there on YouTube, thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time. Explosion effect.
Do you know how I knew your name was Doc? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? I can remember when I was a little boy, my grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining. And for a long time, I thought it was just the two of us that had to shine to us. Just like you probably thought you was the only one. But there are other folks, though mostly they don't know it or don't believe it. How long have you been able to do it? Why don't you want to talk about it?
I'm not supposed to.
Who says you ain't supposed to?
Tony.
Who's Tony?
Tony is a little boy that lives in my mouth.
Is Tony the one that tells you things?
Yes.
How does he tell you things?
It's like I go to sleep and he shows me things. But when I wake up, I can't remember everything.
Does your mom and dad know about Tony?
Yes.
Do they know he tells you things?
No, Tony told me never to tell him.
Has Tony ever told you anything about this place? About the Overlook Hotel?
I don't know.
Now think real hard, Doc. Think.
Maybe he showed me something.
Try to think of what it was.
Drylin, are you scared of this place?
No. Scared of nothing here. It's just that, some places are like people. Some shine and some don't. I guess you could say the Overlook Hotel here has something about it that's like shining.
Is there something bad here?
Well, Doc, when something happens, it can leave a trace of itself behind. Say, like, if someone burns toast. Well, maybe things that happen leave other kind of traces behind. Not things that anyone can notice, things that people who shine can see. Just like they can see things that haven't happened yet. Well, sometimes they can see things that happened a long time ago. I think a lot of things happened right here in this particular hotel over the years. And not all of them was good.
What about room 237?
Room 237?
You're scared of room 237, ain't you?
No, I ain't.
Mr. Allen, what is in room 237?
Nothing. There ain't nothing in room 237. But you ain't got no business going in there anyway. So stay out. You understand? Stay out.